The following paid content is sponsored by the law firm of Jeff Anderson and Associates.
Hi, I'm Joelle Castex. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse by an authority figure in the Catholic Church. In the next 30 minutes, we are going to discuss a landmark law in the state of New Jersey that allows survivors of sexual abuse to come forward and expose what happened to them, expose the cover-up that may have happened at their church or school, and ensure that the scourge of childhood sexual abuse is stopped so that children today and tomorrow are safer. I'm here today with a team of attorneys from Jeff Anderson and Associates. Jeff Anderson is a pioneer in fighting for survivors of childhood sexual abuse. Because of his 40 years of work, we have seen real cultural change across the country in how we help survivors, how we write laws to protect survivors, and how we ensure that what happened to people like me never happens again. Hi, Jeff. I'm so honored to be here today to talk to you about all of the powerful and amazing things that you do for survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And I want to talk about two things that are very, very important for survivors. One of those is privacy.
Well, it's a real honor to have this chance and in this life to work with survivors who do come forward and share their secret, oftentimes after decades of silence and suffering and fear. And when they do, and what we do is to make sure that we protect every survivor's privacy. And not only what they share with us, but give them a chance to have choices in and through the legal system. And in that, remain private as a Jane Doe and as a John Doe.
So let's talk a little bit about how survivors have very, very special needs as they come forward in the process, and how compassion and trauma-informed care play a huge role in the work that you do.
Well, being trauma-informed and understanding the place from which survivors come, which is one of shame and in the shadows, fear and confusion and overwhelmed by power. Knowing and understanding that and being trauma-informed is critical, and everybody in our space is not only informed, but trauma-informed. So when a survivor calls, we know how to listen, we know how to care because we do, and we work every day to make sure we give the survivor choices and to make sure that that survivor is protected from further harm. The new law in New Jersey is the most historic development in child protection and helping survivors that has ever been signed into law. Reason number one, it gives survivors the chance to expose offenders, past and present in the community. Two, it gives survivors a chance to have their voice heard and known in a way never before acknowledged or allowed by law. It opens the courthouse doors and can bring child protection, transparency in the communities about where the risks are and who's chosen to protect those offenders. And three, it allows the survivors a chance to exercise their power and do something to protect other kids in the future in a way no law in New Jersey ever has. It was time, it is time. It's time for our kids to be protected, the survivors to get help, to bring hope and healing.
If you were sexually abused as a child in New Jersey, time is running out to seek. Must be filed by November 30th. Call confidentially today, 1-800-ITS-TIME.
In 2006, I became John Doe 76C. That was a name change I didn't want to have happen. After meeting Jeff Anderson and going to his office and sharing my story of sexual abuse by a Catholic priest, he showed me that I could make a difference in keeping kids safe if I moved forward with suing the church. At the time, I didn't know if I wanted to sue the church or not. The church was really important to me and my wife, to our family, And my goal was to get the church to change some things, to just make it so that this couldn't happen anymore, because my belief was I was one of maybe a couple people, and our church was maybe the only church that this had happened in. And when I went to Jeff's office, I started to learn that I wasn't the only person, and it wasn't the only church, and the problem was really big. And he was encouraging me that I could pursue the church to make changes just the way I wanted, and I didn't have to tell my name. When Jeff started to explain the process that this could start to change laws, this could start to change how the lens that the legal system looks at victims through, not only of clergy abuse, but of any sexual abuse, you really start to feel powerful. What kept me going was it was the right thing to do. What if another kid got this situation handed to them and I didn't do something about it, or at least give it my 100%? I think my own quote unquote Catholic guilt would have killed me. To the person that wakes up every day with the memory and the stain of being sexually abused, I would say you're worth it. You're 100% worth sharing your story to get the help and guidance that you need to help really heal a wound that is unexplainable, a wound that should have never happened. I would encourage you to give yourself more love than you've ever thought you deserved, and come forward and seek help.
I'm here now with survivor Jim Keenan. Jim, for the past few years, you've been a very vocal and outspoken survivor and advocate for other survivors, telling your story, making sure that truths are told, and that other people get the help that they need. But it hasn't always been that way. When you first came forward, you took advantage of filing a lawsuit as a John Doe. Can you tell us a little bit about why that was so important and about the healing process of being a John Doe?
Filing as a John Doe was important to me because at the time, I felt incredibly isolated and super nervous, super scared. I didn't know what impact I would have on my friends, my family. It just was a way that I could seek justice, seek somebody to hear me, somebody to believe in me, and somebody to help me get what I needed, and not have to broadcast to the world that it's me. You know, I could still go to the grocery store and nobody had to go, there he is. You know, so it created a sense of safety and enabled me to start to create a sense of power.
Tell me how important it was for you to realize that you weren't alone.
It was more important than I initially thought it would be. In fact, the important thing to me at the beginning was to remain unknown. And I was about 2 years into my recognition and admittance of being a victim, and I heard Jeff on the radio. I was driving to work, and he was talking about the very priest who abused me by name, and about these other men. And I remember just thinking, what in the dumbfounded, overwhelmed, tears. I pulled over and I called the phone number that had been relayed on the radio interview. And I made an appointment, and my wife and I came down here, and I was instantly believed. And at that point, I was told that I'm not the first victim to come forward, and that Jeff had been fighting these cases since the early 90s, and that this has happened in other areas of the country. And I remember just my head kind of spinning with this concept that there's other people that understand this. So it was really important to me to know that there were other people out there who had done what I had done and made it.
I was abused by Father Cantarto when I was 11, 12, and 13 years old. And I had to relive that over and over again. I used to have flashbacks and nightmares when he took my brother Mike and I to New York City in the movie houses. When he was abusing us in the movie house, and in other times, my soul would separate from from my body, and I would float to the ceiling, and I could see these kids being abused. And at first I thought I was going crazy. I thought there was something wrong with me. I'm going crazy. But then when I get into counseling, I realized that I wasn't going crazy. It was a way for my mind, to fight this. I started to realize I was not alone when I walked into a SNAP meeting and saw that the room was packed, full of people, full of survivors. And the people that I met there got me through some very difficult times, very hard times. I surrounded myself with people that helped me. I surrounded myself with heroes. A good friend of mine who was a war hero, he said to me that I was a true hero. And I said to him, you're wrong. I'm no hero. But what I did was I surrounded myself with heroes. When I would go to a SNAP meeting, there's hundreds and hundreds of people that are there telling their stories, and they want to talk to you. And when you see there's other people that were abused and they're not giving up and they're fighting, and if we all fight together, these pedophiles, they would never go away, but there'll be less and less victims. And that's what we want, less and less victims.
I'd like to introduce you to another team member here at Jeff Anderson and Associates, attorney Greg Gianfacaro. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Joelle.
So tell us, what brought you into this work for survivors?
Well, I grew up in the state of New Jersey, born and raised. I have been an attorney for over 30 years in the state of New Jersey. My childhood parish priest was Jim Hanley, and he sexually abused most of my Catholic childhood friends. And after the scandal broke, a lot of them reached out to me, and one thing led to another, and I've been representing survivors of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church ever since.
Tell me, what do survivors in New Jersey need to know about the law?
New Jersey's law is probably the best survivor-friendly law in the country. Anyone can bring a claim, whether it was a school teacher, public or private, whether it was a priest, anyone has a right to bring a cause of action or a claim against their perpetrator or the institution that employed their perpetrator.
New Jersey's new law is an amazing tool for survivors of sexual abuse, but time is limited. Survivors only have until November 30th of 2021 to come forward, expose what happened to them, expose any cover-up, and perhaps even change the trajectory for themselves and their family. But time is short. Act now.
I didn't even realize what was happening to me. I hadn't even been sexually active. I was all of 14, but I knew it wasn't right. And I knew that it caused me a major distraction. I couldn't focus. My grades started to fall. And so what was the solution? Father Prior thought, well, Monica, if your history grade is falling with Mr. Tambini, you need to spend some after-school time alone with Mr. Tambini to get your grade back up. He didn't look after me. He fed me to Mr. Tambini. I was really fed to him. And that allowed him to do what he did to me more. And I couldn't tell my mom. My mom was going through so many things at the time I didn't want to tell her. I get to take my 50-something-year-old arms and put them around little 14-year-old Monica and tell her, you didn't do it, it's okay. And there were others, so you weren't the only one. But now Now there's a sense of peace. I can walk on this earth and know that I did something. If you're ready to come forward with your story, know that there's people like myself, people that will step in front of you and make sure you're okay.
If you were sexually abused as a child in New Jersey, time is running out to seek compensation in civil court. All claims must be filed by November 30th. Call confidentially today, 1-800-ITS-TIME.
I'm here with Stacy Benson, one of the attorneys on the team of Jeff Anderson and Associates. Hey, Stacy.
Hi, Joelle.
What do we need to know about New Jersey's laws?
Well, in May of 2019, the governor of New Jersey passed the Victims' Rights Bill. The Victims' Rights Bill helps survivors of child sexual abuse. So no matter when your abuse occurred, you can come forward and hold the institution or the perpetrator accountable for the abuse you endured as a child.
So why are these windows so important?
As a lot of us know, child sexual abuse is a crime of secrecy. And for survivors to be able to come forward on their own time later in life, it gives them an opportunity to seek justice, because we know that survivors don't disclose their abuse early. It often takes them several years, and by that point, the criminal statute of limitations is usually passed. So civil litigation may be a survivor's only option.
Stacy, your work is about so much more than just court cases. Tell us how the work that you're doing and the team at Jeff Anderson and Associates is doing is really changing the cultural landscape.
Helping people understand that it's okay to talk about is really going to change, and we've seen this sea change, especially in the last few years with the Me Too movement and all of the different survivors coming forward, USA Gymnastics sharing their story, moving legislatures and Congress to do something about sexual abuse and prevent it from happening in the future. And a big piece of that too is getting the media on board and making sure that survivors can share their stories. So if we can open that conversation to make people comfortable around it, I think we can make a huge difference and protect more kids in the process, which is our goal.
We stand here today to make sure there is light and there is truth, because the practices employed by you, Archbishop, are dark and they are dangerous.
Well, while I'm here, as you can see, the picture that Jeff's holding is my life was pretty much taken away. My childhood, my well-being, my intimacy. And this is the perpetrator that's being protected for what he did to me, and we don't even know how many other young boys and girls. The people that need the most protection on this planet are children. They're innocent. That's why I'm here.
It's not time for promises. It's not time for pledges. It's not time for protocols. It's time for action, and the time is now.
We're here again with attorney Jeff Anderson. Jeff, you have been an expert in amplifying the message of every single survivor so that no one is lost and no one is left behind. What are some of the ways that you do that?
First, we do everything we can to make sure we preserve the survivor's privacy and honor his or her needs for individual attention in the management of their case and the advice we give them. One of the other things that we do that we consider an imperative in working with survivors is making sure we identify the risks, the perpetrators and the predators in the community, and we identify the institutions that made the conscious choices to protect those predators. The people and the public and the parishioners needed to know there was a real problem. And every day since, we work with and align with the media. Why? Because we need to identify through the courage of the survivors, identifying perpetrators and the institutions that protect them, exactly where the perils exist. So the media and working with them is an imperative part of child protection. And letting us carry the message to the media on behalf of the survivors is not only empowering to those that share those secrets that work with us, but it really is a meaningful way to expose the problem and to protect kids and to identify the institutions that made the reckless choices that imperiled the kids.
I'm Greg Gianfraccaro. Together with attorney Jeff Anderson, we represent survivors of child sexual abuse in New Jersey. If you were sexually abused as a child, New Jersey law gives you an opportunity to seek justice and compensation. But time is running out. Claims must be filed by November 30th. If you were sexually abused as a child by either a priest, teacher, or coach, please give us a call confidentially today. It's time.
New Jersey's new law does amazing things for survivors of sexual abuse throughout the state. But time is short. Survivors only have until November 30th of 2021 to come forward, regain their power, get justice and accountability, and perhaps change the trajectory for themselves and their family. Time is short. Act now.
So in 2008, I went public and exposed my abuser. Sexually abused me over the course of a few years at the high school. Pain is a motivator. And I went through a lot of pain. I had to face some really difficult truths and a past that I had never told anyone. And it came to a point where I wanted to be honest about what I had experienced and the pain that I went through. And for over 20 years, I blamed myself. I questioned myself as to where was I at fault? Where did I go wrong? What did I do to deserve it? Coming forward and speaking the truth brought a lot of freedom and a lot of growth, which I still have today, and that journey continues. Knowing that I stood up, I spoke out honestly, I took a stand for righting a wrong, you know. I think also it was important to just, hold people accountable. You're not alone. I know what that's like, and it's the best thing I've ever done is coming forward and speaking my truth and outing evil and outing, predators that still haven't been held accountable, that can still harm other children and other people.
I'm here now with Ellen Lindstrom, one of the attorneys at Jeff Anderson and Associates. Ellen, the work that you do, they didn't teach you this in law school. There wasn't a class about working with survivors. What are the things that you have learned and that you keep in mind every day when you interact with and help survivors?
The most important thing I think of every day is that I know how difficult that call is to make to a firm like ours. Most survivors have never told anybody, and we've been trained to deal with survivors and listen to them, and while we can never walk in their shoes, we can try our best to understand what they're going through and listen to them.
What are some of the things that you do to empower survivors throughout the process?
Well, Joel, it's all about giving survivors choices. When they were kids being abused, they didn't have a choice. They didn't feel like they had anyone to tell. And so one of the most important things we do here is give them a path filled with choices that they can make and choose how to take back their own power. And we give them advice along the way, but we want to make sure that they can make a choice in how they want to respond to what happened to them and seek accountability.
If you were sexually abused as a child in New Jersey, time is running out to seek compensation in civil court. All claims must be filed by November 30th. Call confidentially today, 1-800-ITS-TIME.
We're here again with attorney Jeff Anderson. Jeff, there are people out there right now watching this who have suffered the scourge of childhood sexual abuse. but because of having to live in shame and secrecy, have a lot of real fear about what's going to happen if they pick up that phone and make a call. What do you have to say to those people?
Well, first, that's a very real fear because survivors of sexual abuse by clergy and authority figures suffer in silence. They suffer in fear. They suffer in confusion and shame. And the whole idea of sharing that with anybody else, much less a lawyer, is really hard. And we need to understand and honor that. And so when they do call, what I want every survivor to know is that first, it's private and confidential. Second, we can preserve your privacy. And third, you can be given an opportunity to do something about what was done to you years or decades ago. And the law now allows you to do something and preserve your privacy, and that you can take your power back. The power that was taken from you as a kid. You can do something to reclaim your spirit and reclaim yourself in your own power. And now we have the chance to help you in that journey. And then we can talk about how that works and how that looks and what can be done. The reality is that it's really hard to make the call, and it's really hard to revisit the experiences. But by doing so, you're really recovering the power. And every survivor that stands up and gives voice to his or her truth is doing something to protect other kids and become a part of what we call the child protection movement in America.
Jeff, when I think about two of the most powerful and important and influential decisions I've made in my life, I can pretty much narrow them down to two. The first was when I picked up the phone and I was brave enough to come forward under California's civil window. And the second was when I began working very closely with you to help other survivors. And so I consider it a huge honor to be sitting here with you today as we talk about the team, we talk about your work, we talk about the unique opportunities for survivors. And I just want to thank you on behalf of myself and everyone watching for all of your work in the movement to protect children from childhood sexual abuse.
For that, I just have a kind of gratitude that I live every day. To you for sharing this journey, and to every survivor that's a part of making this such a meaningful, purposeful, passionate, and often painful journey that needs to be honored, but also is transformative and transformational. And I'm grateful.
New Jersey's new law is an amazing tool for survivors of sexual abuse, but time is short. Survivors only have until November 30th of 2021 to stand up, take action, and ensure that what happened to them does not happen to another child. The deadline is approaching quickly. It's time.
The preceding content was paid for by the law firm of Jeff Anderson and Associates.